1985 was one hell of a year for film. Yes, we were past the Star Wars years.
No!
Past the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and finally seeing more choices in horror than what seemed to be slashers, and more slashers. On the mainstream side, we saw the releases of Commando, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, Clue, and about a million more movies. There were, of course, plenty of other films released in the horror world that year, and one of those was a little movie that appealed to those looking for the spooky and gross stuff that they can't get in a general audience film. On today's episode, we go into the mind of Dr. Herbert West, a man with a good head on his shoulders and another on a dish on his desk in our 80s horror memories.
Who doesn't love Herbert West? The Re-Animator was one of those movies that everybody talked about. And if you really look at Re-Animator, the thing that everybody remembers is that visual gag of getting or receiving head.
For those unsuspecting viewers who saw this without warning or any expectation, Re-Animator is either pure delight or an absolute aberration. Of course, it seems like the film was made to be a bit of both in the best way possible. It was Stuart Gordon's second directorial effort and his third writing credit. The man is now known for his genius and weirdness, but also his sweetness. He was the kind of man when meeting him at a convention or festival, it was not just an honor, it was a delight. He had stories forever and was a charming man who enjoyed spending time with fans. Having passed away in 2020, he is deeply missed in the community, and for good reasons. His work was solid until the very last, and Re-Animator showed fans how talented and weird he was. I had seen bits and pieces on television, but it took a few years and many trips to the video store to be curious about it. You see, the VHS box art for the film enticed me. It has a man with a glowing syringe. It was pretty colorful, and it seemed to be the kind of film made for me. I mean, look at that pretty green. Neon green. My little brain wanted to see it. But it took a few years. I believe the first thing I saw of Re-Animator was after we moved to a new city, something we did a lot of, and got a new video store to go to. The store had movies played on televisions above the aisles, and had employees without much concern about who would be watching. So during one of those visits there with my father, who was too busy talking about something random with some stranger as usual, I got to watch a good long part of Re-Animator. I can't even remember if the sound was on. I only remember love at first sight. I was an impressionable kid with a love for the dark side. I was scared to death of Freddy Krueger, yet I watched all I could about him on television. For Herbert West, I didn't even know his name. I knew he was the guy with the glowing neon green syringe, looking intently at something on a poster that had mystified me for years. Having him above the screen at the registers at the video store was as close to seeing this movie as I would get for years. Although I hadn't seen the whole film, it certainly made an impression. As the years went on, and many horror movies later, I found myself sitting in a theater watching American Beauty. During a scene, two characters were talking about this very movie, which sent me back in time to the video store. Pretty soon after, I finally rented it and saw the whole thing for myself. And that story, man. That story got me to pay attention. So what's the story about here? A new student arrives on campus and becomes roommate with an A student who often has his girlfriend over, the dean's daughter. As the new student gets weirder, his secret experiments start to become a bit more problematic. That's the basis of the story here, but really it's much more than that. This was enough to hook most people, especially once you add the name of H.P. Lovecraft as the author of the original works that this film is based on. That name alone means a lot to many in the horror genre, and it's still a great source of base material for filmmakers. There is something in Lovecraft's writing that is easy to bring to modern audiences. either in a period piece or by modernizing it. Re-Animator, at its start of life as a film, was meant to be more faithful to the source material, which Lovecraft admitted he wrote for the money as he was paid per installment, something that happened a lot through the years with many authors. So writer-director Stuart Gordon and co-writer Dennis Powley took the original writings that became Re-Animator and turned it into something of their own, which they later admitted was closer to a Frankenstein parody than the original Re-Animator material. The film follows Herbert West, a mad genius medical student who has a nebulous background that starts in Germany, or so the poorly written German signs on the wall tell us. He finds his way to Miskatonic University in Arkham, Massachusetts. The names here are no accident, of course, and they have remained in the pop culture world for as long as they've been invented. Once at his new university, he meets Dan Kane, a good student with good grades, a good life, a good girlfriend, and all the good things one can expect to balance out Herbert West and his experiments. Or so we are made to think. As West left his previous school under odd circumstances, it's clear that he has some strange ideas about life and death, including how to circumvent the end or return from it. As any good horror movie would have it, he loves to experiment and soon uses his roommate's cat to try his serum on to see if it works. And well, it does, in a way. His horrific results quickly need to be tested on humans, and soon. And he finds the perfect subjects. Of course, this comes at a price, and Kane soon is involved much further than he'd like to be. Kane's beautiful girlfriend, Megan Halsey, is often at their home, eventually leading to the unthinkable. Of course, before we get to this, there's a talking head, some mayhem, and a lot of fake blood. Soon, Kane is faced with an impossible decision, and he goes for it, which leads to wrong results. It's bloody, it's creepy, it's goofy, it's all the teenager who grew up in the 80s could want. I had memories that now fit within a film, within a story. I also now had a better understanding of this film and had a massive love for it. Jeffrey Combs was adorable as the mad scientist, and Barbara Crampton was hot. Hell, she still is. Bruce Abbott was an all-American hero with a dark side. There was something for everyone here in terms of the cast. While Abbott has pretty much retired from acting, Combs and Crampton are still kicking ass and are always a pleasure when they appear on screen.
And that's, there's a real charm to it. And at the end, with the head of the villain being held over this poor naked Barbara Crampton, salivating, and who's going to listen to a talking head is brilliant.
As a teen, going in knowing just what I had seen in trailers and on those video store screens was enough to make me pick up the film. There was a lot of movies to choose from, but I remember Herbert West. I recalled the green glowing serum. I took this home and went into our creepy basement living room with no actual walls, a view of the washer and dryer, my closet, and the door to the outside stairs. Living in that neighborhood, strange noises were just part of life, and they added to any horror movie watching experience. So I set myself up to get the creeps from a movie and my environment. Of course, the main attraction here was the horror. The horror is balanced with humor, so the film doesn't become too serious or heavy. Of course, the sheer amount of fake blood used here, 24 gallons to be specific, takes the movie from just gory to a bit ridiculous in a significant way. The effects here are practical, meaning they've aged rather well, almost 40 years later. There's something about a bit of latex, some rubber, gallons of fake blood, a fake-looking dead cat, and a bunch of goo that make a film better than any CGI could ever do. Here the effects are lovely. They're gross. They're part of why I ended up wanting to work in special effects. Teenage me looked seriously into doing special effects for a living because of films like Re-Animator, Tremors, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and all those behind-the-scenes specials that were on TV as a kid. Alas, being allergic to many of the materials at the time, that ended up being the wrong career choice for this nerd. Nevertheless, horror films were a huge part of my childhood. Even if I wasn't allowed to watch them, I snuck as much of them in as I could. Like with Re-Animator, watching bits and pieces on the screens at that video store, watching movies while being babysat by a good but very allowing babysitter, reading about them in Fangoria, watching about them on Entertainment Tonight, and getting to watch a lot of them with my dad, as he didn't care one bit what I observed. Somewhere between being scared by Jason, traumatized by Freddy, I found Herbert West. One of those odd kinships. He was a weirdo, he was a maniac, but he was also misunderstood, and looking to understand life and death.
The really careful razor's edge dance that Stuart Gordon did in terms of keeping it not only moving forward, but having there be humor coming from the character of Dr. Herbert West. It's not making fun of him. He's very true to himself. But then that last act, unbelievable gore effects. It's sort of like Society, where you're building and it's like the frog in the kettle. You're building, and all of a sudden, boom, you get what you've been waiting for in ways you never imagined, and then you have to go like this. Wow, that was amazing.
I didn't know that some of this would be the making of my goth teenage period, the start of my love for horror and fake blood. Stuart Gordon would go on to adapt more of Lovecraft's work, such as From Beyond and Dagon, both cult classics in their own right. He even collaborated with writing partner Brian Yuzna to create a far less horrific tale with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Can you imagine parents saying to their kids, "What a fun and original story. Let's check out what else this Gordon fella can make." Nowadays, it seems younger audiences know of the film, but it is beloved by those who grew up with it. The sequels Bride of Re-Animator, released in 1990, and Beyond Re-Animator, released in 2003, are wacky and fun, but nothing comes close to the 1985 original. What are your thoughts on this movie? Leave us your memories in the comments, and we will see you on the next one.
On the next episode, we take a look at the underrated sequels from two heavy hitters, with A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, and Friday the 13th, A New Beginning. Until next time, gore hounds.
You are all my children now.
Hi friends, your humble narrator Tyler Nichols here, and I hope that you enjoyed that episode of 80s Horror Memories. If you missed our previous episode, click over here. If you want to see more from our series, click up here. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you doing? Subscribe right here. And most importantly, stay spooky, folks.